Hi, my name's Eileen. My mother died suddenly, and my father didn't even show up to the funeral. He was in Mumbai with his mistress. That night, I got a message from an unknown number. I'm not dead. Come to my grave, now. And when I did, she was standing there, alive, crying. You can't tell anyone I'm alive, she whispered. He tried to, but what I saw next, it still keeps me awake at night. Before we dive in, tell me, where are you listening from? And have you ever uncovered a family secret that changed everything? Drop it in the comments. Let's begin. The church smelled like chrysanthemums and rain. I sat in the front row, my hands clasped so tightly that the tips of my fingers turned pale. People filled the pews behind me, neighbors, old co-workers of my mother, women from her book club. They all spoke in soft, practiced tones of sympathy, but every time I heard the same question slip through the whispers. He didn't come. Not even for this? It cut a little deeper. The seat next to mine, front row, center, was empty. That was where my father was supposed to be. His name was printed neatly on the program, right under "Survived by her husband, Dr. Adrian Draven." I tried to tell myself he must have been delayed, maybe stuck somewhere important, maybe he just couldn't face it. But even as I thought it, I could feel the lie souring in my chest. When the choir began to sing, I stared at the casket. It was simple, pale wood, surrounded by white flowers. My mother had always hated chrysanthemums. Funeral flowers, she used to say. I almost laughed at the irony, almost. Mara, my older sister, moved through the crowd like a hostess at a fundraiser. Her makeup was perfect, her voice measured. She shook hands, nodded, smiled at condolences as if we weren't burying the only person who ever loved us without condition. That was always her way, control the scene, control the story. From behind me, my aunt's voice broke through the murmurs. He's in Mumbai, she said, low, but not low enough. Business trip. With that girl. The air left my lungs. That girl, Clara. The same woman I saw at the hospital fundraiser last spring, 20 years younger, laughing too loudly beside my father. I'd tried to convince myself it was nothing then. But now, sitting in a pew meant for both of them, I knew what it really was. When the priest asked if anyone wanted to say something about the deceased, no one moved. The silence stretched until I couldn't stand it. My knees trembled as I stood. I didn't prepare anything. The words just came. My mother was the kind of person who believed love could fix almost anything, I said. My voice quivered, then steadied. She forgave, even when she shouldn't have. She gave even when people only took. Maybe that's what made her extraordinary. Or maybe that's what broke her. I didn't mention names, but I didn't have to. The air thickened. Someone sniffled. A camera flashed. A reporter, probably. I saw the headline in my mind already. Doctor skips wife's funeral for overseas trip. By the time I sat down, my cheeks burned. The pitying glances, the hushed voices, they stung worse than grief. I wanted to vanish. After the service, Mara handled the guests like she was wrapping up a press conference. I slipped out through the side door, away from the condolences, away from the flowers. The rain had stopped, but the pavement still gleamed like glass. I drove home alone. The windshield wipers squeaked rhythmically, the only sound in the car. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Texts from co-workers, friends, old classmates. Sorry for your loss. Thinking of you. I tossed it onto the passenger seat, sick of the noise. But then one message appeared on the screen, short and sharp enough to still my breath. Unknown number. I'm not dead. Come to my grave. Now. For a second, I thought it had to be some kind of cruel joke, someone trying to get attention. My fingers went numb. I stared at the message until the letters blurred, then threw the phone onto the seat again. My heart hammered so loud I could hear it over the hum of the tires. But then something strange happened. The radio, which had been off the whole drive, flickered to life. The static gave way to a song, the sound of silence. My mother used to play it when she couldn't sleep. "It helps me think," she'd said once, smiling at the irony. My hands started to shake. "No," I whispered. "This isn't happening." The next thing I knew, I was turning the car around. I didn't remember making the decision. I just knew I had to go. By the time I reached the cemetery, night had settled in, heavy and cold. Fog drifted between the headstones. My flashlight's beam wavered as I made my way to her grave, the newest one, the soil still uneven, the flowers from the morning already drooping. Everything was still. Then, somewhere beneath the quiet, I heard it. A faint, uneven sound. Breathing. My heart slammed against my ribs. I knelt, pressing my hand to the earth. It was damp, soft. For a second I thought maybe I imagined it. Grief, exhaustion, anything but what it sounded like. Then I heard my name. "Eileen." It was barely a whisper, but it was her voice. I froze. The flashlight trembled in my hand. And then, from behind the tombstone, someone stepped out. She was pale, trembling, her clothes soaked in dirt. Her hair clung to her face. Her eyes, those same eyes I'd seen in the mirror every morning, looked at me like she was seeing a ghost. "You can't tell anyone I'm alive," she gasped. Her voice was hoarse, desperate. "He tried to—" She stumbled forward. I caught her before she hit the ground. Her skin was cold, her breath ragged. I could barely understand her words as she whispered one last sentence before going limp in my arms. "He tried to bury the truth with me." I looked down at her face in the faint light and realized the woman trembling before me wasn't supposed to exist. Her body felt weightless in my arms, yet the warmth of her skin told me she was alive. My mind couldn't keep up. One moment I was standing at her grave, and the next, I was kneeling beside her, brushing mud from her cheek as if my hands could undo whatever horror had brought her here. Her pulse was faint but steady beneath my trembling fingers. Mom, what happened? How is this possible?" I whispered. My voice came out thin, almost childlike. Her eyes darted around, wide and wild. "Not here," she rasped. "They're watching." The fear in her voice jolted me. Before I could ask anything, her grip tightened on my wrist, stronger than I thought she could manage. "Drive," she ordered. "Don't ask questions yet." I half-dragged, half-carried her to my car, my heart beating hard enough to blur everything around me. The headlights carved through the fog as I helped her into the passenger seat. When I looked down, the dirt from her grave had smeared across my sleeve, a dark streak that felt like a mark I'd never wash away. The drive back to my house was silent, except for the sound of rain starting again, gentle at first, then heavier. Every glance at her made my thoughts spin faster. She stared out the window, barely blinking, her breathing shallow. I wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but somehow I knew, she wasn't ready to answer. When we reached my house, the porch light flickered as I unlocked the door. Inside, the ticking of the old kitchen clock filled the space. It was past midnight. The only light came from the lamp by the couch, casting long, uneven shadows on the walls. She stumbled in and immediately went to the windows, pulling the blinds shut and locking them. Then she covered the mirrors in the living room with a blanket from the couch. "Mom, what are you doing?" I asked, following her movements. "If he knows I'm alive," she said quietly, "he'll finish it." That sentence hung in the air, heavy and unthinkable. I stared at her hands as I tried to clean the dirt away with a wet towel. Her skin was warm, her nails chipped, her palms trembling. She was real, not a ghost, not a memory. Who? I finally asked. Who would do that to you? Her eyes met mine, tired, haunted, certain. Your father, she whispered. Then she hesitated, her voice trembling as she added, and she helped him. She didn't have to say the name. I already knew. Clara. The rain grew louder against the windows. I sat across from her, trying to process the words. My father, the man who'd spent his life controlling everything and everyone around him, was capable of this. The part of me that still wanted to believe in decency, the daughter part, refused to accept it. Mom, I said, my voice shaking. You can't just disappear and come back from the grave. What are you saying? He tried to kill you? She closed her eyes, exhaustion pulling at her features. He said it would be painless, that he'd take care of everything, the house, the money, the future. I didn't know what he meant until it was too late. My mind snapped back to 2 weeks before the funeral. She'd been dizzy after dinner that night, saying the food tasted strange. My father insisted on adjusting her medication. He'd handed her a new bottle, same label, different pills. I hadn't thought much of it. He was a doctor. Why would I question him? That same week, the family lawyer came by. I wasn't invited into the meeting, and Mom said afterward that she hadn't been allowed to sit in either. It's just paperwork, Dad had told us, waving it off. Bureaucratic nonsense. Now, hearing her voice, I realized what it had been. They declared me dead before I even stopped breathing, she said, her words trembling but clear. They buried the truth along with me. Tears blurred my vision. I reached for her hand. Mom. She leaned back on the couch, shivering, her lips pale. He made it look official. There were doctors, documents, everything signed. Why? I whispered. He wanted me gone. Legally. Erased. I couldn't speak. The woman sitting before me was living proof of something impossible and something monstrous. As I helped her change into dry clothes, I noticed her old coat, the one she used to wear to the market every Sunday. When I picked it up, something clinked in the pocket. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a small plastic drive and an envelope burned around the edges. What's this? I asked, carefully unfolding it. Inside were half-burned documents. My father's signature stretched across the bottom of each page, next to legal jargon transferring power of attorney and estate control to Clara. My stomach turned. He wanted to erase you completely. My mother's eyes filled with tears, but her voice was steady. He already did. On paper, I don't exist. I stared at the documents, then at her. The funeral hadn't been a farewell. It had been a cover-up. We have to go to the police, I said, my voice sharper than I meant it to be. She shook her head instantly. No. They won't believe me. He owns half the board, every doctor, every judge. We're nothing but a footnote to him. If we go to them now, he'll find us before they do anything. I leaned forward. Then what do we do? Her expression changed, fear melting into something else. Defiance. We find proof, she said. The kind he can't burn. For the first time since the cemetery, she didn't look like a victim. She looked like someone who had already decided to fight. As the rain outside turned into a storm, I plugged the USB drive into my laptop. The screen lit up, and folders began to appear. Dates, receipts, hidden files. When I clicked the first one, a series of images filled the screen. I froze. They weren't pictures of my mother. They were of me. I leaned back slowly, staring at the screen as the images kept loading, one after another, all of me. Me at the gas station last Tuesday, squinting into the sun. Me walking out of my office with my coffee in hand. Me in my own kitchen, barefoot, scraping toast crumbs into the sink. It didn't feel like surveillance. It felt like I'd been studied. My mother stepped closer behind me. I could feel her breath stop. "He was tracking you," she said, her voice so low it was almost inaudible. I turned to her. "But why? What would he get out of watching me like this?" She didn't answer right away. Her hand went to her chest, the way she always did when something hurt deeper than she could say. Then finally, she met my eyes. "Because you were next." My skin prickled. "You remind him too much of who I used to be," she whispered. I stared back at the screen. The folder was labeled Contingency AM 2.0. My initials. And hers. At first, I thought it meant nothing more than obsession, some twisted form of control. But then I clicked into another folder. Legal files opened, drafted documents full of dry language that grew colder the more I read. One file was a will, not hers, not mine. It named Clara Maddox as the sole guardian and beneficiary of the entire family estate. That part I almost expected by now. But the second document chilled me. Asset transfer, Aileen M., pending. My name. But it wasn't clear which Eileen it was meant for. Me or her. "He didn't just replace Mom," I whispered. "He wanted to replace me too." I stood up, pacing slowly across the living room floor. "It wasn't just about stealing the money," I said aloud, half to myself, half to her. "It was about rewriting us both, wiping us out on paper, then filling the roles with someone new, and using Clara to do it." Mom sat down heavily on the edge of the couch. "That's what he does. He doesn't just remove people, he erases them, like we were variables in an equation, not daughters or wives, just placeholders for the next phase of his plan." I couldn't breathe right. The air in the room had gone thin. "Everything makes sense now," I muttered. Every time he complimented me for being logical, every time he told me not to be soft like you, he wasn't just comparing us, he was testing me, grooming me to be like him. Her eyes welled and she nodded. "That's how he raised you, not with love, with expectation. And you always did what he asked, because you thought it made you strong." I closed my eyes and let out a bitter laugh. I thought I was the rational one, the safe one. Turns out, I was just a prototype. I walked to the kitchen, needing something, anything, to ground me. The kettle was still half full from earlier, so I turned it on, needing the simple rhythm of boiling water. "You always said keeping peace was strength," I said to her, still facing away. "Even when Dad humiliated you, even when he lied to me and Mara and made us believe you were just difficult." She didn't say anything. I turned back around. "But this isn't peace. This is silence. And he's counting on that." Outside, the night had begun to lift. The sky was a dull gray blue, streaked with early light. The kind of morning that made everything feel suspended, like time hadn't fully decided to move forward yet. I looked at my own reflection in the window, half light, half shadow. "I'm not staying quiet anymore," I said. "If he wants me gone so badly, then it's time I finally show up." Her voice shook. "Once you start this, there's no going back." "I know." I walked into the den, pulled open the old drawer of Dad's filing cabinet I'd kept tucked in the corner. Years ago, I'd found a flash drive hidden in one of his folders. A spare, I thought. But something about it had always felt off. Now, I plugged it into the laptop beside the one we'd just finished going through. I watched the screen, same folder names, same file structure, every folder, every file name, every note, even the timestamp format, was the same. The backup I found in my father's desk all those years ago wasn't accidental. It was part of something carefully rehearsed, like a stage play waiting for the curtain to rise. The morning light filtered through the blinds, turning the walls a pale gold. I rubbed my face, still cold from last night's air, and whatever was crawling inside my veins now, My mother sat silently across from me, hands wrapped tightly around a chipped mug of tea she hadn't touched. I turned back to the screen. My hands hovered over the keyboard. What kind of man created a mirrored archive of lies and buried it in plain sight? I tried typing Clara21 as a password. Access denied. Then my mother's birthday. Still nothing. I hesitated. There was only one more name I hadn't tried. Mara. I typed it in. Simple, deliberate. The screen blinked, then opened. Rows of folders appeared like a spreadsheet of secrets, scanned documents, redacted memos, digital receipts, travel logs, and something far worse, conversations. A folder near the bottom made my heart stop. Contingency AM 2.0. My initials. I opened it. Inside were photos, taken without my knowledge. Me, walking to my car after work. Me, inside the kitchen, making coffee. One shot looked like it was from inside my gym. I pushed my chair back, hands shaking. "He was tracking you," my mother said from behind me, voice thin, hollow. "Why me?" I managed. "Why not just erase you and leave it at that?" She stepped closer. "Because you remind him too much of who I used to be." I looked at her, and for the first time, I saw her not as a mother, but as a woman who'd survived him. A version of me that barely made it through. I clicked into another folder labeled Legacy Plans. There, beneath dozens of scanned legal papers, was something that made my stomach twist. A draft will. Clara Maddox was named as the sole guardian and beneficiary of the estate. Another document, unsigned, was titled Asset Transfer, Eileen M. Pending. 2 names, one erased, one rewritten. My initials, AM, weren't just a coincidence. They were a template, a placeholder. He was remaking our family with her at the center. "It wasn't just about money," I said quietly. "It was about control. He wanted us out of the picture entirely, legally, emotionally, even in memory." My mother didn't speak for a while. When she finally did, her voice cracked. "He started shaping you to be his mirror from the time you were 10. I didn't argue. I remembered. "Don't question me," he'd say at the dinner table. "You're not like your sister. You think logically, like I do." He praised my quiet over Mara's defiance. He twisted love into discipline, encouragement into pressure. "He killed your independence before he ever touched mine," my mother said softly. "And he almost did the same to you." I blinked fast, not because of the tears, but because I didn't want to let them fall. Not yet. I moved to the next file. Photos again. This time of Clara. Young, wide-eyed, always next to him, on boats, at conferences, standing by his side like a devoted wife long before anyone noticed, or maybe everyone did, and no one said anything. I remembered the first time I met her, 2 years ago at a hospital fundraiser. She said she was his executive assistant, shook my hand and said, "You're so much like your father." Back then, I thought it was a compliment. Now it felt like a curse. In one file, I found her passport, issued under the name Clara A. Maddox. He'd already married her. "He made her part of us," I whispered. My mother stared at the floor. "And erased me." We sat there for a long moment, the truth settling between us like dust that wouldn't brush off. Then, a sound, a soft ping. My laptop lit up with a new email. Timestamp 5 minutes ago. From CM. Subject, "You shouldn't have opened that." The hair on my arms stood up. I opened it. One sentence stared back. "We both know she's not supposed to be alive." I turned to my mother. She didn't need to read it. Her body stiffened like someone had touched her spine. "We need to leave," she said, voice sharp. "Now." Before I could close the laptop, my phone vibrated. New text. "If you love your mother, stop digging." No name, just a threat wrapped in sentiment. I looked at her, this woman they'd buried once already. She was pale, tired, but there was steel behind her eyes. "No," I said. "We've buried enough." I opened a travel site. She tried to stop me, but I wasn't listening. I searched for the next flight out of JFK. One seat left. I booked it under an alias. Her voice cracked behind me. "Please don't go. He'll be waiting." I grabbed her hand gently. "I'm not going there for him." "Then who?" I stared at the confirmation page. "Yeah, for her! The woman who thinks she can wear my name." The cab jerked to a stop just outside the terminal, and the air hit me like a wall. Wet, hot, pulsing with noise. Mumbai didn't whisper. It screamed. Diesel mixed with incense, horns layered with chanting from somewhere I couldn't see. My clothes clung to my back before I even reached the curb. I held tight to my small carry-on and walked toward the prepaid taxi stand, every step echoing with my mother's voice. "You can't trust anyone tied to him." I kept my head down, my alias ready, Lena Marsh. A woman with no past, no family, no funeral in Connecticut. The hotel was a modest place tucked into a side street near the Kolaba district. Dim lobby, faint smell of mildew and curry. I signed the register with a steady hand, or so I hoped. The receptionist didn't say anything at first, just glanced down at the name I wrote. Then he looked up. "Welcome back, Mrs. Maddox." Time froze. His voice was casual, like he'd said it a dozen times before. I managed a polite smile, masking the rush of cold that flushed through me. Someone had been here, someone using my name, my actual name. As I walked to the elevator, the wallpaper blurred. I had come here for answers, but clearly the woman I was chasing had a head start. That night, the Oberon Hotel across the street pulsed with light and laughter. From the rooftop bar, voices carried in English and Hindi. I spotted her before I even sat down. Clara. She looked polished, every inch the perfect hostess in silk and diamonds. Her laugh rang out over the rim of her glass. But what chilled me wasn't the way she carried herself. It was how familiar she looked. Same shade of lipstick my mother once wore. The same bracelet my father had bought at a fundraiser in Boston. She raised her glass and said something that made my stomach twist. "To Eileen Maddox, the woman who started it all." They laughed. Casual, cruel, clueless, like it was a punchline. I raised my phone, snapping a photo from across the street, but the flash fired by accident. Clara's head turned like a hawk's. Our eyes met. She didn't look surprised. She didn't even flinch. She smiled, slowly, like she'd been waiting. She found me before I had time to retreat. I was halfway down the sidewalk, fumbling with my hotel key, when I heard heels approach behind me. "You shouldn't have come here," Clara said, her voice quiet, controlled. I turned to face her, every nerve in my body lit like a wire. "You're using my name," I said, not caring who heard. "No," she said calmly. "I'm using his." I blinked. "You were the practice version." The words landed with surgical precision. She said them like she was reciting a recipe. "He told me everything," she added. "How your mother played victim, how you thought you could save her. But you're just like her." "I'm nothing like her," I hissed. She stepped closer. "He said you'd say that too." I hated how calm she was, how sure. And then she dropped another line, soft, deadly. "He's dying." My breath caught. Not from concern, but from the sudden sense of the ground shifting beneath me. "That's why you're here, right?" she said. "Because deep down, you want closure. Maybe even forgiveness." I stared at her. She knew too much, and I had no idea who she really was. "Do you want to see him?" she asked. "He asked about you." I shook my head. "You don't know what he made me." Her lips curled. "Don't I?" We met for dinner the next night. I didn't tell my mother, didn't want to hear her beg me not to go. I needed to see it through. The rooftop restaurant overlooked the city skyline, lights stretching like stars fallen to earth. I wore the same plain dress I'd worn on the plane. Clara, of course, looked like a Vogue spread. "He said you'd be difficult," she said after the first sip of wine. "He said you'd be forgettable," I replied. A breath of silence, then we both laughed. But it wasn't humor, it was exhaustion. We were two women built from the same betrayal. "I don't hate you," she said finally. "I almost admire you." "Don't," I said. "Not when you're wearing my life like a costume." Her phone buzzed, and I caught a glimpse of the screen. D. She didn't hide it. That's when my phone buzzed too. From my mother. "Leave now. It's a setup." I looked at Clara. She knew. She didn't even try to pretend. "I was hoping you'd stay long enough to toast the end of your story," she said. I rose, leaving the wine untouched. "You picked the wrong ghost to play with." I walked out slowly, knowing better than to run. Clara stayed seated, phone in hand. She was texting again. I didn't need to see the name. I knew who D was. And now he knew I was here. Back in my hotel room, the air felt thicker, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. My phone buzzed once on the nightstand. "You shouldn't have left dinner early." I froze. My eyes darted toward the door, then the hallway beyond it. The fluorescent light outside flickered, casting uneven shadows that stretched across the carpet like reaching hands. My heart thudded against my ribs. I waited for another message. It came 5 seconds later. "Check your reflection." I turned slowly toward the mirror hanging opposite the bed. At first it was just my reflection, tired, sweating, afraid. Then, behind the glass, a small red dot blinked to life. A camera. Watching. Recording. I moved before I could think. I grabbed my shoe and slammed it against the glass. It shattered with a high-pitched crack, shards spilling across the floor like broken ice. When I looked down, my reflection had split in two. Fragments of me scattered, distorted, both calm and terrified. "You wanted me visible," I whispered to the empty room. "Fine. Watch this." I sat at the small desk, laptop open, fingers trembling just enough to make the keys click unevenly. I had spent years working in data systems at a mid-tier law firm, enough to know how to trace an email if I had to. I opened the metadata of the last message, ran it through a tracking script, and waited. The line jumped through half a dozen VPNs before landing somewhere I didn't expect. Not Mumbai, New York. More specifically, Draven Maddox Associates, Manhattan office. My father's name. "So he's watching too," I muttered. I set up a decoy livestream on my phone, looping a video of me sleeping in bed. Then I dimmed the lights, slipped into the hallway barefoot, and moved quietly toward the emergency exit. The carpet muffled my steps, but every sound still seemed amplified. The hum of an elevator, the faint buzz of an old air vent. Halfway down the corridor, I caught my reflection again, in a convex security mirror near the ceiling. A man in a black suit stood by the end of the hallway, facing my door. He wasn't hotel staff. I ducked behind a service cart, waited until he turned slightly, then slipped through the back stairwell, my pulse roaring in my ears. My mother's voice rang inside my head. "They'll make it look like you never arrived." The cafe 2 blocks down was nearly empty, just the hiss of the espresso machine and the hum of ceiling fans. I sat near the window, pulling my hoodie low and connecting to the free Wi-Fi. I opened my cloud drive. Someone had uploaded a file under my name. I hesitated before clicking it. The video opened. It was my hotel room, same wallpaper, same lamp, but the footage showed me pacing, shouting at someone off-screen. Then the camera angle shifted. I pushed forward suddenly, and the unseen figure stumbled out of frame. The video cut to static. Timestamp. 1 hour in the future. "They're framing me," I whispered, the words scraping out of my throat. My fingers flew across the keyboard, typing a message to my mother. They have footage. Her reply came seconds later. Leave everything. Come home. But I didn't move. I stared at the looping static on my screen, at my own image turned into evidence. No, not yet. They'd already buried her once. They weren't burying me. I walked back into my room with purpose, not fear. The air conditioner rattled faintly, the broken mirror pieces glinting on the carpet. I left them there. Let whoever was watching see exactly what they'd made. I set up my laptop camera, adjusted the lighting, and hit record. If you're watching this, I said quietly, voice steady, I'm not missing. I'm not dead. But someone wants me to be both. I leaned closer. Draven Maddox and Clara Maddox, if anything happens to me, look there. The words felt like steel leaving my body. I attached the file to an email and sent it to every contact I could think of. News outlets, law firms, a few friends who still owed me favors. Then I sent one final text to Clara. You should have buried me deeper. I turned off every light in the room except the bathroom one. Its reflection cast through the cracked mirror, splitting my face again. But this time I smiled. I wasn't hiding anymore. Then came the knock. 3 sharp taps. Not hurried, not hesitant. Measured. I looked toward the door, every nerve alert. My mother's old scarf hung on the back of the chair. I wrapped it around my neck, grounding myself in her scent, lavender and old paper. Time to stop running, I whispered. When I opened the door, the man on the other side wasn't a stranger. It was Noah Vance. For a second, I couldn't breathe. The last time I saw him was at my mother's funeral. He'd handed me the folded flag with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Back then, I thought it was grief. Now, I knew better. Noah, I whispered. What are you doing here? He looked older, smaller somehow. The sharp lines of his suit were gone, replaced by a wrinkled shirt and an expression that carried too many sleepless nights. You shouldn't be here, Aileen, he said, his voice low and unsteady. You weren't supposed to see any of this. Then tell me what I wasn't supposed to see. He hesitated, eyes darting down the hallway like someone might be listening. Not here, he murmured. I didn't wait for another excuse. I grabbed my bag, the scarf still looped around my neck, and stepped past him. Then let's go. He blinked, startled, but I'd already locked the door behind me. My father had always used other people to speak for him, lawyers, assistants, men like Noah. Tonight I wasn't listening through a messenger. I wanted the truth straight from the source, even if it burned. We drove through the narrow back streets of Mumbai in silence. The headlights carved thin paths through the humid air. Finally, we pulled into a deserted parking lot behind an office building that looked half dead, its windows dusty, its sign missing half the letters. Inside, the corridors smelled of old paper and mildew. Somewhere deep below, a generator hummed faintly, as if the building itself was trying to keep a secret. Noah lit a cigarette with shaking hands. The flicker of the lighter illuminated his face, drawn, haunted. Your mother, he began. She wasn't supposed to die. The words came out flat, rehearsed. Then why did she? He exhaled slowly, smoke curling like a confession. Because she found out about the contract of silence. I frowned. What contract? The deal your father made to protect his assets and erase his mistakes. He sat heavily on the edge of an old desk. He paid to have her declared dead before she could expose him. The room seemed to tilt. You mean he had her declared dead while she was still alive? Noah nodded once, the cigarette trembling between his fingers. Legally, she doesn't exist, and neither will you once the second contract clears. My throat tightened. The words didn't make sense, but they did. Everything suddenly did. My mind flashed back to that gray morning in Connecticut. The church smelled of chrysanthemums and rain. Noah had stood near the altar, rigid and silent. When he handed me the flag, he avoided my eyes. I'd thought he was being respectful. Now I realized it was guilt. I thought she'd really died, I said quietly. She was meant to disappear, he said, eyes cast downward. He told me it was for protection, said she was fragile. Said you were too. Protection? I almost laughed. You let him bury her alive, in paperwork. His shoulders slumped. He said if I talked, he'd ruin me. He already did, I said sharply. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Dust floated in the weak light, each particle carrying the weight of a lie. You can stop him now, I said. No, he whispered. You don't understand. He's dying, but he's still dangerous. The way he said it made my skin crawl. Dying men didn't usually need to hide behind contracts, unless they were planning something to survive themselves. Noah reached into his coat and pulled out a worn envelope, its corners soft from handling. He slid it across the desk toward me. Inside were several papers, thin, yellowed, stamped with seals. I skimmed the first page, catching words like power of attorney, termination clause, declaration of absence. And then, near the bottom, my name, Aileen Maddox. He forged your consent, Noah said. It gives him full control of everything, your inheritance, your identity, even your citizenship. I stared at the signature that looked like mine. The handwriting was eerily precise, just slightly neater than my own. He's erasing me for good, I said, unless you expose him first. He handed me a small USB drive, no bigger than a house key. This has what you need. Proof he paid for your mother's disappearance, and the names of the people who helped him. The drive felt almost weightless in my palm, but my fingers curled around it like it was something alive, something that could explode. I looked up at him. Why help me now? He met my eyes, voice breaking. Because I helped destroy her then. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. For a moment, neither of us moved. The generator hummed below. The city outside seemed far away, like another planet. And then, just as I opened my mouth to speak, a harsh beam of light sliced through the cracked blinds. Headlights. They swept across the room, blinding, and then a car door slammed outside. Noah turned toward the window, his face drained of color. He found us, Noah whispered. Before I could react, glass exploded behind us. The shatter echoed like gunfire through the empty building. Noah dove behind a desk, grabbing my arm. Run! But I didn't. The voice that followed froze me where I stood. Put the drive down, Aileen. The light flickered once, and then I saw him, my father, stepping out of the shadows like a ghost that refused to stay buried. He looked thinner, his face carved with illness and pride in equal measure. The same authority in his eyes that used to stop conversations at dinner tables still lived there, sharp, cold, commanding. You shouldn't be here, he said quietly, as if I had broken some sacred rule. You were supposed to stay protected. Protected? My laugh was sharp. From what? The truth? His gaze flicked toward Noah, who stood trembling in the corner. You dragged her into this, my father said, voice edged with disgust. Noah's hands rose slightly. She deserves to know. She deserves peace, Draven snapped. No, I said, my voice shaking. You mean silence. He looked at me then, not with rage, but with something far worse. Pity. You always reminded me of her, he said finally. The same foolish defiance. You mean the same strength, I shot back. He smiled faintly, bitterly. Strength. She begged me to stop, Aileen. You think I wanted this? You think I wanted her gone? You staged her death, I said. I tried to save what she was destroying, he snapped. She was going to ruin us all, our family, our name, everything I built. I stepped forward, trembling but firm. You built lies and called them legacy. He drew a breath, slow and controlled. Legacy keeps us alive. No, I said quietly. It's what kills us. For a long moment, we just stood there, two halves of the same bloodline, divided by everything that mattered. He was trembling, I realized, not from weakness, but from the weight of his own delusion. He thought he was saving us. He always did. His voice softened, like a thread pulling loose. She's not dead because I wanted her gone, he said. She was supposed to disappear, just long enough for me to fix things. You staged her death, I repeated, slower this time. It wasn't supposed to be permanent, he said, eyes glinting. But when she stayed gone, I said, you didn't look for her. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. You saw a chance to be free of the guilt, I whispered. To rewrite the story again. He closed his eyes. When she called, I told her not to come back. That's my sin. And you'll live with it, I said. His eyes opened again, wet, desperate. No, you will. Unless you let this die with me. I held up the small USB drive between us. I'm done burying the truth. Noah tried to step between us. Aileen, think. If you release that, it'll destroy everything. Your mother's chance at a quiet life, your own safety. She doesn't have peace, I said. She has silence. That's not the same thing. Draven took a step forward, his frail frame casting a long shadow on the concrete. Let it go, Aileen. I already lost her. Don't make me lose you, too. You never had me, I said softly. His expression cracked, just slightly. You're still my daughter. Then act like it. The laptop was on the table beside me. I plugged the drive in. Draven's composure crumbled. You have no idea what that will do, he warned. Neither did she, I said, when you buried her. I hit send. The progress bar filled slowly, the hum of the generator beneath us counting the seconds. When the file finished uploading, a soft chime echoed from the screen. It was done. The truth was no longer ours to control. Somewhere outside, sirens began to wail. Draven's shoulders slumped. His eyes looked hollow, defeated. You've doomed us. No, I said. I've freed us. By the time dawn crept through the city, the building was surrounded. Red and blue lights flashed against the cracked windows, painting the dust with color. I stood outside the estate, our old family office, watching as police led Noah toward a waiting car. His wrists were cuffed, but his face was strangely calm, almost relieved. On the porch steps, my father sat slumped against the railing, wrapped in a blanket, oxygen mask dangling uselessly from one hand. He looked smaller than I remembered, like a monument crumbling under its own weight. As I approached, he turned his head. His voice was barely a whisper. You're her daughter, after all. Finally, I said. In my pocket, I held my mother's locket, the one I'd found by her grave. It was open now, the tiny photo inside long gone. All that remained was a fragment of mirror. For the first time, I looked into it, and I didn't flinch. My phone buzzed in my hand. One new message. You did what I couldn't. Now finish what you started. I stared at the screen as the sun rose behind me, burning through the fog. For the first time, I realized the fight wasn't over. It was just mine now. That thought echoed in my chest as the plane touched down on the tarmac. The sky above Connecticut hung low and quiet, draped in a curtain of muted gray that made the gold and orange leaves outside the window seem almost too vivid. 6 months had passed since I pressed send in that crumbling office. 6 months since I stopped running. The headlines had screamed his name for weeks. Corporate patriarch implodes in legacy scandal. Whistleblower. Daughter breaks silence. The kind of stories people read with morning coffee, then forget by lunch. But I hadn't forgotten. My father died before he ever faced trial. Heart failure in a federal holding cell. Poetic, some would say. He was still wearing his wedding ring when they found him, The company collapsed, pulled apart by lawsuits and questions no one wanted to answer. I wasn't named in the investigation. Some called me brave, some called me ungrateful, most just called me survivor. But I didn't feel like a survivor. I felt unfinished. Once, over a whispered call routed through scrambled lines, my mother had said, "You didn't destroy him, Aileen. You just ended what he started." That sentence clung to my ribs like a bruise. Now I was home, and home was quieter than guilt. My first stop wasn't the house. It was the cemetery. I hadn't been back since the day we buried a name instead of a person. Her headstone was still unmarked, just a patch of grass and a clean slab of granite. I'd asked the groundskeeper to leave it that way. The air was sharp with rain, the kind that hadn't fallen yet but was promised by the sky. I knelt, brushing a few dry leaves away from the stone, my fingers running along its edge. "They know your name now," I said softly, "and mine." A gust of wind rustled through the trees above, and for a moment I could almost hear her voice again. "You can't tell anyone I'm alive?" I wondered if I'd ever see her again. After the drive was released, after the fallout, she disappeared once more. No emails, no calls, just silence. The files had told the whole story, about how my father paid to vanish her, how people were bribed and records were erased. It all came out. It saved others. But the price was exile. Somewhere, she was living under another name, another life. From my coat pocket, I pulled out the old locket. I'd replaced the empty space with a photo I dug out of an album in the attic, her face mid-laugh, hair caught in motion, alive in a way she'd never been in any of the lies. "You can stay hidden," I said. "I'll stay loud for both of us." When I returned to the house, there was a letter waiting in my mailbox. No name, no return address, just a white envelope, edges soft like it had been carried in someone's pocket for a while. I knew the handwriting before I even opened it. "Aileen, if you're reading this, it means the world finally caught up with your father's lies. Don't spend your life hating what he did. He spent his life hating himself for it. You're not his mistake, nor my shadow. You're the truth we both couldn't face. Keep living, loudly." I sat down on the steps and read it again, and again. The ink blurred as the tears came, not out of anger, not even grief, but something quieter, something like peace. I pressed the letter to my chest. I whispered the words she left me with. Loudly. Then I opened every window in the house and let the cold air rush through. A few weeks later, I stood behind a podium at the local community center, staring out at a group of mostly women, some my mother's age, others my own, a couple young faces in the back, a row of notebooks in front. The flyer had said, "Inheritance of Silence, How Families Bury Truth." "My name is Aileen Maddox," I began. "And for a long time I believed silence kept people safe." A few nods, a few crossed arms. "But the truth is, silence only protects the ones doing harm." I told them what I could. Not the scandal, not the headlines, but the quiet parts, the manipulation, the way secrets rot you from the inside out, how pretending something didn't happen doesn't make it go away, it just passes it down like bad blood. "Speaking truth doesn't destroy families," I said. "It saves what's still worth saving." Afterward, an older woman with soft gray hair came up to me, a look on her face I couldn't quite place. "You remind me of someone I once knew," she said, smiling kindly. "Maybe you did," I replied. Outside, the clouds finally broke, and light poured through the windows like it was looking for something. The glass caught my reflection, steady, whole, and finally, mine. That night, I sat at my desk, the cracked mirror from my mother's old house resting beside my laptop. The crack no longer scared me. It was just a mark, a scar that proved it survived. I glanced at my reflection. Not broken, not lost, not hiding. "You wanted me visible," I said softly to the glass. Now I am. The red light on the laptop's camera blinked to life. I hit record. My name is Eileen Maddox, I began, voice clear. And this is the truth my family tried to bury. The screen faded to black, but my voice lingered. Silence built their empire, but truth will keep me alive.